Hi, thanks for all the very interesting comments on the discussion forum for my lecture about the status of morality. I just wanted to pick up a couple of things that came up and say a few more things about them. In no way is this going to settle the debate or maybe even advance the discussion, but hopefully it'll give you a little bit more food for thought regarding some of the stuff that came up. So first thing, some people asked whether there could be moral principles that were universal and so in that sense objective, but nonetheless which had different applications in different contexts, and whether that might in some way undermine the distinction between objectivism and relativism. Or going the other direction, other people were interested in whether there might be particular moral judgments that we all almost universally agree about, but when we try to find their basis, we disagree. So, and again, whether that undermined the distinction between objectivism and relativism. So just as some examples, so an example, the first kind of thing, you might think that someone might say, look, here's some evidence for relativism. Women ought to wear headscarves in public, or men ought to take off their hats indoors. These sorts of claims are true in some cultures and false in other cultures. So that's, you might think, some evidence for relativism, but the objectivists might come back and say, no, there's a universal moral principle, roughly something like the when in Rome, do as the Romans do principle, and that just applies differently in different contexts. So if you find yourself in a culture where women wear headscarves, you should do that, but in another culture you don't have to do that, that's no evidence for relativism. So that would be a kind of an example of a universal principle that has differing applications in different contexts. Or an example going the other direction is something like, you might think, we all agree kicking dogs for fun is bad. But we might disagree about why it's bad. Some people might say it's because of the pain, some people might say it's because of the disrespect, who knows what. So there might be differing views about why it's bad, even if we all agree that it is bad. So the question really is, what does this tell us about the debate between relativists and objectivists? And I guess my opinion is that in some sense these examples are real examples and they tell in favor of a kind of objectivist view. If the evidence for relativism is disagreement, but you can locate the source of that disagreement in agreement on some higher order principle that then gets applied differently in different contexts, then that's some reason for thinking that objectivism is true rather than relativism. I think what these examples illustrate and what this issue illustrates is that there might be two senses of objective that are at play in this debate. So there's one sense of objective where it means something like independent of us, the objective facts, like the facts you might discover in science. There's another sense of objective where it means something like universal, applies to all people. And so I guess it's important to distinguish those two senses of objective. When somebody says they're an objectivist about morality, they might mean either one. I think when relativists say that they're relativists, they really mean to only be denying the second one, that there's some moral principles that, or maybe all moral principles that apply to everyone equally. They could agree with the first sense that the moral principles are somehow independent of us, out there like scientific facts. So that was one issue that I wanted to raise. The second issue I wanted to raise, which is deeply related to that, is this question several people asked, well, so what should we even think morality is? And more specifically with respect to the theories that I outlined in the lecture, could morality maybe be some kind of disunified thing where objectivism is true about some moral principles, relativism is true about other moral principles, and emotivism is true about still other moral principles. So you might have thought, like, I was asking in the lecture which of these is the best theory, and that was a bit like asking who's best, Bayern Munich, the Miami Heat, or Serena Williams. Bayern Munich won the Champions League, the Miami Heat won the NBA Finals, and Serena Williams is the top-rated player in the Women's Tennis Association. But you might think it's kind of, those are three different things. They're kind of incomparable. You don't really ask which is the best in that sense. So was my asking which is the best theory, objectivism, relativism, or emotivism, sort of like that? Well, I want to admit that I think moral judgments often come from different places. So sometimes when people are talking about morality, especially when they're thinking about how to organize society, they seem to talk about what's best for the most number of people. So if you're a sort of politician arguing that a particular policy is the best, morally the best policy to engage in, you might be thinking about what's best for the most number of people. Whereas other times people seem to be talking about what violates their conscience, or what would be sort of an inconsistent reason to act for. And that would be something different. And still other people or maybe the same people in other moments seem to be talking about what would be warranted or licensed by their religion or the God they believe in. So I think that it's true that we get morality in these kind of different domains, and there may be still other domains. Still, the idea that a lot of philosophers have had is that morality kind of hangs together as a subject or as a domain in at least two respects. One respect is what philosophers call agent neutrality. So the idea is that the reasons that morality provides for our acting are agent neutral. They don't depend on my or your particular circumstances. They would apply equally to anybody in the same circumstances. And so they're agent neutral in that way, not relative to a particular person's circumstances. And the second idea that philosophers sometimes appeal to for unifying morality is that moral reasons are overriding. So the thought is that, look, when you're trying to decide what to do, there might be all sorts of different reasons. There's reasons for, this would be good for your family. There's reasons this would be good for to make some money. This might feel good, or this might be a beautiful act, something like that. But if we're talking about morality, whatever the reasons are, they override everything else. And so morality is in that sense overriding. So the thought is, if, and I don't know if this is true, this is a big if, but if morality is distinguished by these two features, that the reasons it provides are agent neutral and overriding, then you would expect there to be some unified domain. And then, so it would be a little bit weird if relativism was true about part of that domain, and objectivism was true about another part of that domain, and emotivism was true about a third part of that domain. Reasons that are both agent neutral and overriding seem like to demand one unified explanation. That's just a sort of theoretical hunch. It's not an argument, but that was a theoretical hunch that was behind some of the comments I made in the discussion forum about how I thought it probably couldn't be that each of these theories was right about their own domain. Now, like I said in the lecture, I don't think any of these theories is probably completely right. Each of them need refinement, and there might be only some successor theory that's the right theory, but still I would find it theoretically dissatisfying if there wasn't one theory that covered this domain, because I think I'm working from this idea that there is a unified domain that provide agent neutral and overriding reasons. But of course we might think that's wrong too, so that's up for debate. But anyway, there's been a lot of really good discussion, and I encourage you to keep discussing the issues from my lecture and also the issues from the later lectures, and we'll keep watching those discussion forums. Thanks so much.